Thank you and welcome back to the Patriots 300 level podcast. My name is Eric and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 85th episode this week where we'll be recapping the end of the Patriots season as well as the surprising news that the Patriots are firing head coach Jerod Mayo. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter /X and Instagram at Pat's 300 level pod for up to the minute updates and commentary on news of the day. Kevin, I know you're at the game today. Season ended pretty terribly. I don't know what was worse, how bad the season was, or that you had the number one pick and then you find a way to win the last game and drop you down to four. But I think something that a lot of us were hoping for, some earlier than others, but especially these last few weeks, that Jerod Mayo would be gone as head coach. I didn't think that Kraft would have the stones to actually do it. But less than an hour or 2 hours after the game, there was the news that came out by Schefter that Patriots are firing Jerod Mayo. What was your overall thoughts on that before we even just get into how the season turned out?
Yeah, overall, I was shocked that it happened that quickly.
Yeah.
For sure. I think, but looking back at like previous histories with the team, any of their end of season kind of releases that they have are usually they're not that immediate. They're usually
Yep.
like the Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Last year was Thursday
Thursday
morning
morning.
with Bill.
The the year before, I believe it was Wednesday night,
hmm
when they sent out the either Wednesday night or Thursday night where they sent out the letter to season ticket holders saying that they were going to be conducting searches for a new offensive coordinator, how disappointed the season went, yada, yada, yada. But again, like you said, I wasn't expecting it to be an hour or so after the
Yeah, I definitely
last
was
snap.
expecting that. So I thought we are going to be in the long haul of a few days of kind of painstaking waiting for it because
Yeah.
I did think it was possible. And especially the more it went, I think the Chargers game is what really I think did it. And we didn't have a podcast after that, but it was such a disaster of a game, and you're getting blown out in such fashion against.
Yeah.
And the big thing, we tweeted this out, got a lot of reaction where Robert Kraft can't look at this team and then see what team came in and beat them and say we'd made the right decision. Where you look at the Chargers of all teams, where the ownership group isn't supposed to be that great there. They
Oh,
never
they're terrible.
they don't spend
As
money.
someone that lives in San Diego, surrounded by fan current and former fans of the Chargers, the Spanos family is horrendous.
hmm
As much as we get on Robert Kraft for what he's done to the Patriots, it doesn't even compare to how bad of an ownership group the Spanos family
hmm
is.
And to see what they did with their team, and they were kind of at crossroads that you were. They did have the quarterback, but everything
Yep.
else really, they didn't have. And to see what they did is they actually went through a real coaching interview process, and they
Yep.
interviewed I think what 11 guys, and
Yep.
then they did a real GM search, and then they ended up pairing up what Harbaugh wanted for the GM and having competent coordinators come in
Yep.
that have done everyone that had experience, and that was a competent coach going into there. And then you look to see what they did, and you have a real coach go in there and turn the program around from
And,
what Brandon Staley was doing.
and
Um,
not only that too is they're also in a rebuilding year too. They
mhm,
had so many cap casualties this past offseason where they got rid of their top two wide receivers and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They got rid of their one of the best running backs in the league, all-purpose yard backs, and Austin Eckler. They got rid of players on defense, and because going into the offseason, I think they were 30 or 40 million over the cap.
mhm.
And to do that, and you see them on your home field where literally a year ago the Patriots lost to them 6-0, and that's because Bailey Zappi couldn't throw the ball to his own team, or Tyquan Thornton dropped the ball that would have been a touchdown and you would have won 7-6. And you see how much uh
How much you've really fallen as an
exactly.
organization with that game. I think that was the game where after that happened, I didn't think it was really possible. Even after the Cardinals game, I was like, there's a small chance they may
Yep.
do this, but I just don't think they'll have the stomach to do it. It was really after that Chargers game. And then after the amount of booing and the chance to fire Mayo there, and for Kraft to see that and hear that and then see his stadium half empty. Um, actually probably more than half empty for that game towards the end of the game. And then to see what happened, again, I don't think he made any decision from this Bills game. I think he knew going into that. I think the Chargers game was really that kind of crux of it. I think between
Yeah.
the Cardinals game and then the Chargers game, and then just adding up all of the gaffes that have happened throughout the year, they haven't improved. They've gotten actually worse, you would say.
Yeah.
And they keep on having kind of communication issues all the time, where it's between the head coach or the assistant coaches, the players kind of talking out of turn, and it's just it's made this kind of organization into organizations we used to rag on, but he's
Yeah.
saying like, oh, well, this would never be us. Like, what joke of an organization this was, and they kind of turned into that. And they really needed to have someone, and they need someone to go in there and set a culture and set the organization and know what their plan is. I think that's the biggest thing where Jerod's issue was going into this year is since he never had to interview for the position, he never had to have a plan set forth of what this season was going to look like, who he was going to hire. And
Yeah.
that's what caused those delays in hiring coordinators because he had no idea who he was going to hire. And he had no idea what kind of culture he wanted to establish. And even looking back at his press conference, he never really said anything of detail of what they were looking to do. When you
Yeah.
actually look at other coaches' press conferences, um, I do think eventually, if he learns from his mistakes and kind of doesn't have the hubris that I think he had going into this, and really takes a deep reflection that what he could do to improve, I think he could be a good head coach in the future. He just has to take a lot of steps. He's not anywhere
I,
near
yeah.
that
I
right
think it's
now.
possible, but I can't say one way or the other just because he's barely been a coach at any level to begin
Hmm.
with. Just 5 years of being a position coach at the same position he coached. He's never
Hmm.
coached anywhere else on the football field. So that's why it's tough for me to say. Again,
Yeah,
even
that's
after
why
this
I
year,
said he could. He like
yeah,
he has to do a lot of work,
yeah,
and that's his. The big thing is his whole thing. I think the defense was a huge indictment on him too,
yeah,
with the Crafts, where you could say the offense is going to be a work in progress. Like, you need a lot more talent there. You don't have an offensive line. You have a rookie quarterback, but the amount the defense took a step back, and you brought everyone back except for
yeah,
Bill and Steve. And you can't even blame the injuries because you had a bunch of injuries last year.
yeah.
Um,
You got back one of the best defensive players in football
mhm.
that you barely had last year, and you're even worse than you were last year too.
Yeah. And the
And
fact that he couldn't step in and provide answers and run the defense because he never had in the first place.
yeah,
So he really needs to kind of go back and be a positional coach, not a linebackers coach, another maybe a defensive line or a
yeah, I
cornerbacks
think
coach.
defensive line would be a good
Secondary
start
would be
place.
a good
Yeah,
one because that's where they learn a lot of the schemes and that sort of stuff. And usually that's the other thing for Covington. You don't, a lot of people, that I'd say like trajectory for defensive coordinator isn't from a defensive line coach. They usually have secondary experience because that's
yeah.
where all the communication stuff comes from. So maybe being like a secondary coach and then or like an assistant and then kind of grow up from there and then learn other routes and just there's so much that you learn that you have to do as a head coach that you don't do as even a defensive coordinator that he was way over his head.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. It was. I blame the Crafts the most for what happened by
Yeah.
putting him in this position where they should have realized he was not ready and this is not
Yeah.
the time they wanted to have him in the position and eat the $10 million uh, and go forward with a real search. And then partially on him just for the fact that he
Oh,
didn't
more than
recognize.
partially.
I would say, well, I would give them if you're doing it's not 50-50. I would say it's 60-40 Crafts and him.
I'd say it's mostly craft, but I don't say Jerod Mayo's the victim here. He's the
Oh, he's
one
not
that
a
was
victim.
saying too. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's what I was saying there. Where when you were saying it, it made it sound like that. But
Oh no,
Robert,
I just mean the
J-
weight. Like if you're weighing out who's the
yeah,
most responsible for it, it's definitely the Crafts one. They should have never put him in the position to begin with.
yeah,
But the second one is he should have known he was not ready for this, and to think that he could do this even when he was a second year coach, where he was putting his name out there saying that he could be a head coach hire, trying to get interviews for head coaches when he was only a positional coach for 2 years
Yeah.
is ridiculous. And the fact that
Yeah.
it's really an insult to all the coaches that kind of put in all the work and build up their resume to become a head coach, because they put in a lot of coaching years to
Yeah.
learn everything. And to think that you could do everything with not knowing really anything is really insane. And the other thing is to be a CEO head coach where that really means you understand everything. You
Yeah.
understand the offense, you understand the defense, you understand special teams, and you can kind of be that octopus that has its tentacles and kind of everything, and pop your head in and put your input and fix things there and stuff like Bill did.
Yeah.
Um, and you can't do that when most you don't know the offense, you don't know special teams, and you really only know the linebacking group.
Yeah.
You've never coordinated a defense. So it just didn't really make sense. And what they really should have done to try and set him up, it still probably would have failed, would have been to put more experienced people in for the offense and the
Well,
defense.
that's the thing that they tried doing too, is just no one wanted the
Yeah, no
jobs or
one wanted the
positions,
job
at least on
because,
the offensive side. It seemed defensive side that they wanted Covington to begin with, which
yeah.
again, we thought that that was fine, but again, we had our reservations because of how inexperienced
Hmm.
they would be on that side of the ball. But offense, Van Pelt, which again, he was what, your 12th, 13th
12th
option.
guy, I think.
But he was the only, like, he had the most experience out of all the guys that you interviewed anyway.
Hmm.
But there's just a lot of people were turned off based on Jerod Mayo, reportedly based on what he was saying in the interview, saying how the Patriots, you're coming to an organization with 6 Super Bowls, and he was trying to take credit for that, but not really giving vision as how he was going to move it forward to a 7th Super Bowl. Also, with the interview process with Jonathan Kraft and Robert Glazer being in the interviews, that turned people off too. Whereas
Hmm.
someone like Nick Caley turned down being one of the highest paid coordinators in pro football because of that, in an organization that he used to coach in and knows very well, knows the region very well. But I know you're talking about that the Chargers game might have been what helped turn it around. I also wonder if like the final nail in the coffin was Jelani Tavai's comments this week, where that just showed Robert Kraft what the culture inside the building has
Hmm.
turned into. Where again, the Chargers was a very bad look, but then seeing how arrogant the players on the team were, where you never saw this with Bill, even in the bad season last year,
Hmm.
everyone, while they were defending their coach, they still wouldn't say anything like that to the media. And
Hmm.
just seeing how bad it's turned, it probably gave Robert flashbacks to 1999, 2000, where he moved on from Pete Carroll.
Yeah. And I think the other thing which kind of I think it makes me believe the reports more. Are there those reports saying that when Robert and Jonathan were calling around on May and how to actually support Mayo and can you support Mayo, it just makes more sense where it when you actually really look at it, you can't because if you and this is probably something that they've kind of realized towards the end too, where if you blow out AVP and Covington, who's going to want the job? So
Yeah,
like not only like if you fire them, who can you hire? Because no realistic coordinator that's good would want to come. Number one, you couldn't get someone last year.
yeah,
Uh, who are you going to get now where they know that Mayo is on the chopping block year two, and they're
yeah.
just going to get fired along with them?
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's either a up and coming coordinator where you have a option to finally get a coordinator position, but like you said, they'd be gone, or it's an
mhm,
experienced coordinator, former head coach, where they know more than the head coach, and
mhm.
who would want to be taking orders
Yeah.
from someone that was as clueless as Mayo was this year, whether that's fair to Mayo or not.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of that just got into the calculation of where they said they just can't move on with them. It just doesn't make any sense. Where
Yeah,
they haven't improved and they can't bring anyone in that could do a better job for assistance, and it would have actually made more sense to just bring back everyone, and that was not an option. You can't do
yeah.
that when you're
Yeah. You
basically
would lose
three.
all the support of your fan base.
Yeah, they would lose. Right, there was a poll right before the game, like, what would you want to do, keep Mayo or fire him? It was 96% said to fire Mayo.
Wow.
So if if you brought everyone back, you would just you would really see a hit next year. Because number one, they wouldn't be improving it. They would improve a little bit by spending money, but and more draft picks. But it's really you're stuck in no man's land. So,
Yeah.
um, they did the right thing. I'm very happy that they did. I didn't think they would have the stomach to do it. And this is something where I completely admit I was wrong. I Neither of us thought that Mayo would work out.
Yeah.
I never thought it would get to this point where it would
Yep.
be this
Agreed.
bad,
We all
this
said
quick.
before the season that our prediction was the
I think I
offensive
actually
coordinator
nailed
would be gone. What?
the I think I nailed the record. I think I said 4 wins,
You
and
did.
you
You said
said
four, I
three. I
said
think, right?
three.
Hmm.
Yeah. But we said before the season that AVP will probably get the axe this year,
Hmm.
and with blame of Bill giving them a bad roster. Then Wolf
Hmm.
gets the axe next year, saying Wolf didn't support Mayo enough with the players. Then Mayo gets
Hmm.
axed year three. I
Yeah.
don't think any of us thought in our wildest dreams, even though we didn't think it was going to work out, there was any chance that Mayo would be gone year one. But we also didn't think it was going to be this bad
Yeah, I
year
never
one.
thought it would be this bad. I thought they were going to win 4 games, but I thought it would look better.
I
And
I thought it was
not
going to be inconsistent. I wasn't expecting the defense to be as horrendous as it was.
that's
Offense,
what I meant. Like
yeah,
the offense I thought was going to look the way it was. The defense, I didn't realize. Well, I realized that he didn't have that much input, but I thought he would have learned a little bit more in the 5 years he was
yeah.
here, to be able
I
to help out.
Yeah, and I thought it was going to be more game to game where you'd have some really good games, one game like Cincinnati, and
Hmm.
then you might get blown out the next. I thought it'd be inconsistent, but I didn't think it was going to be consistently bad, minus 2 games of
Hmm.
Cincinnati or 3 games, Cincinnati, Chicago Bears, who are horrendous, and then the Buffalo game, sort of.
Hmm. But yeah, I think we've talked about mail a lot and
Yeah.
basically voiced our displeasure over the last probably 4 or 5 podcasts. Um,
It's been all season, Kevin.
um, so they definitely did the right move. Losing the first overall pick, we can get into it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think a next episode we'll do more of a season recap. I
Yeah.
don't think we need to really recap the Bills game because it was uh, it was two teams trying to lose.
Yeah.
I think, and I think that's really when you have the Bills putting in their third string quarterback that's like out there, like you knew that Trubisky wasn't doing enough to try and lose the game.
Yeah.
And just some of the penalties that they declined and punting when they're on the 35-yard line,
Yeah.
like the Bills were not trying to win this game,
They weren't.
and they almost gave it to you. Like they didn't
Yeah.
want to win, and they were up, and all you had to do was just run the ball.
Yep.
And but this is where I think Mayo knew he was gone, uh, and I think everyone knew they were gone, so they were trying to kind of stick it to him like a Lovie Smith situation,
I don't know if
especially.
he did though, because I know a lot of people are saying Mayo thinks he was gone, but why would he not play Drake May more than he did though?
I wonder if they told him like if you play him more than
Or
whatever, you're gonna
you're fired. You're fired
get
earlier.
fired right before the game.
Yeah. So like
um,
I have no idea, and I wonder too if now that if Mayo's gone, if he's gonna start spilling the beans on Kraft as like
I
shots
just
at
wonder if
Kraft.
he can though. Like if they have some sort of like NDA that's in their contract, like if you're fired, you
Uh,
can't speak like ill of the team for like you never even really like Bill would do it in innuendo, but he never actually said anything actual bad about Kraft.
well,
Um,
that's not in Bill's character growing up
it's not, but I
in the
also
military
wonder, yeah,
academies.
I wonder I would think in like contracts they would put something in there to kind of protect
Probably,
themselves
maybe,
um for that.
yeah. So
The other thing though too with him knowing he may not have actually heard it from Robert. He may have heard the Schefter report before the game, probably
yeah,
from an agent or wife or someone. And that's when Schefter's saying it and he's saying like leaning out, he's not saying that because he's just thinking it. He's saying it
yeah,
because he's heard something.
yeah,
And there's sometimes that he can't report something because he was told something, but he was like promised not to report it. He's mentioned this before, where
yeah.
like you have to sit on something, and then everyone kind of reports it at once. So I think that's one of those things there where he already knew ahead of time that statement was coming out after the game, and he just couldn't
Maybe,
say it yet.
yeah.
Um,
So
I,
I think it's important to talk about losing the number one pick, though. Again, there's not much you can really ask the team or players. Players are never going to willingly lose. Coaches are never going to really realistically try to lose a game. You might put in backups, but you're not going to call plays to lose the game on purpose
Hmm.
because that just sets a bad culture. So we saw Joe Milton really just ball out today, which was impressive to see. Again, the Bills defense sucks, and it was their second and third string guys minus
Hmm.
Damar Hamlin. So I don't know how much you can really take out of it, but again, it's better than if it was playing in the preseason versus guys that aren't even going to be on
Hmm.
practice squads. So that was definitely encouraging to see, but it, it sucks losing the first overall pick because of how much talent this roster needs and how much better you could have gotten in recent years if you trade down from number one. There's two quarterbacks in this draft, and pretty much five of the top 10 teams need quarterbacks. So by trading down from number one to four or six or eight, you could get a haul where you could get two or three first round picks in the top 10. So now that you're at four, you're kind of stuck. Maybe you can get another first round pick if you trade down from four to eight or nine to get Carl Banks or Will Campbell to certify your offensive line because both of those probably aren't going to be rated as top five picks.
Hmm.
And you're either going to have to reach for a position of need, which is never a good thing, or you're going to have to go with another position. And then you still don't address the biggest glaring hole on the team. So by at least having that number one pick, you have options. By having the number four pick, there's some flexibility you can do, but I don't think you can take Banks or Campbell at four. I don't know how much you really like Travis Hunter. Some people are still high on him. Some I don't know if it'll translate if you're playing him at just receiver or corner, etc. Tet from Arizona, Abdul Carter, who I like a lot, but do you go defense when you still need tackles and wide receivers? So it's definitely hurts them going forward, but it's still good to have a top four pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a lot. It's you can't openly lose
Yeah.
lose the game. You can't go kneeing at every single thing. There's a few things
It
they
would
could
have
have
been it
done
would have been
to
funny though. Someone
if I,
tweeted this out, but when Joe Milton had that touchdown, it was end up there was a penalty on Caden Wallace, but then the replay assistant showed that it was incomplete. Would have been funny if Sean McDermott declined the penalty to have it be a touchdown.
yeah. What a throw that was though. It's just I think with him, I everyone knows I love Joe Milton. Like
Yeah.
it's he is just so fun to watch. He's got a rocket of an arm. He's huge. He's fast. He's there was a Bills guy that tried to sack him and he ran into him and then someone said it was like running into a Cybertruck
Yeah.
by what it looked like. He just
Yeah.
fell to the ground and then well and May not May Milton stood there like it was nothing. And his accuracy has definitely improved since
At least this one game.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if that keeps going.
Yeah.
And is this something where he keeps developing? It could be a nice little trade piece
Yeah.
in a couple years. You saw that like Matt Flynn back in the day, he ended up
Yeah.
getting a decent amount of money. You ended up trading Garoppolo for a second, so there could be something there, or it could be a really nice backup piece for the Patriots.
The
Um,
only bad part though is you're gonna have the idiot fans for the next
oh, for the
12,
next yeah,
12
the next
months
12 months,
or
say
three
that you.
years saying you need to have Joe Milton over May or trade May
Mm,
for a first round pick or something like that. But
hmm. Like we just saw what Milton did, and he can do
yeah,
everything, and maybe he can. But
yeah,
I would stick with May right now.
yep.
And I don't, yeah, like you said, it would have been so much nicer having the first pick because you really could get a bunch of picks, and I don't think you could get as much maybe as years past where the
You might because there are more teams that need quarterbacks. There's less inventory
yeah,
and they're
it's
more
gonna be
desperate. Like
interesting to see how desperate they get for these two guys that aren't. Some are saying aren't real first round caliber,
yeah,
top of their
like
first round
there were
caliber
some scouts,
quarterbacks.
some reports from scouts, NFL scouts this week saying that if they were in last year's draft, they would have been quarterback 7 and 8
Yeah.
behind Bo Nix.
Hmm.
So again, it teams are desperate though. We see it all the time.
Hmm.
Whereas there are five teams in the top 10 that need a quarterback, and there's only two guys going. Whereas last year, even though there was a clear top three, a lot of teams still were very high on Penix, McCarthy,
Hmm.
and Nix. And so teams didn't have to jump up to three and give
Hmm.
up 3 first round picks. Whereas this year, if you need a quarterback, it's either go with these two guys or you're screwed and you have to look for the Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, etc. in free
Hmm.
agency.
Yeah, or try and trade for JJ McCarthy, which would be
Yeah,
that's going to be
that
a
too.
very interesting
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing to follow this
Which
offseason.
again, I haven't followed how Minnesota's doing. I saw Sam Darnold suck the first quarter and a half, but
We
it'll be
need the
interesting.
Lions to win to expedite a process, and we'll get
Yeah,
into that in a little bit. But what was I saying? Oh, you don't know really. You like you said, it could be one way or the other. If they get very desperate, you could if you have the first pick, you could be potentially having 3 first round picks
yeah,
for that one pick. Or you may not. It was just the options you have. You're not going to get 3 first round picks for the fourth pick.
yep,
That's not
exactly.
going to happen. So you
Yep,
lose out on that. But in all things, I would rather take the fourth overall pick and not have
me
Jerod
too.
Mayo be back next year than
Me too.
having the first overall pick and having him back. So
Yep,
I
agreed.
think it's a win when to at least have him gone.
And speaking of the offseason, one of the other news, at least as of now, is that Elliot Wolf is reportedly back. Again, there are reports that things can change, but as of now, Elliot Wolf is still in charge. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think the Wolf one's it's not as clear cut of like he's going to be gone today, tomorrow. The big thing with that is that usually the way it works is like the scouting department isn't usually all fired when a new GM takes over, just because they're doing work the whole year on scouting these players, and whoever the GM is doesn't have all these scouts to do that. So they usually have to utilize the reporting that the scouts have and kind of
Yep.
manipulate like, oh, I don't want you to factor this in, so change your kind of reports that way. But at least they've run all these guys. So they still need that work to get done. There's the Senior Bowl, or I think it's the Senior Bowl. There's one of those college bowls coming up, I think in February.
There's
Um,
the Senior Bowl and the East West Shrine Bowl.
yeah, and the odds are you're not going to have a GM in place. You maybe by then. It's usually the end of January is when the coach gets hired, and they'll probably be with the GM. So are you going to really have enough time to get that guy in place and get everything set up? So right now you just need someone to run the ship, and odds are he's probably gone by the end of by next year. Where I
He
think they're just
better
kind
be,
of,
is my thought.
oh, he
But
better
when I
be,
saw
yeah.
that,
I think he would.
because because as bad as Mayo was this year as a head coach,
Mhm.
I think you can make the argument that Elliot Wolf as the general manager has been as bad, maybe even worse as a general manager than Jerod Mayo was as a
Mhm.
head coach.
Yeah, so that's why I'm just holding out hope that this is the reason why, because
Yep.
that's what makes the most logical sense. Where
Yeah.
they need someone to at least run the ship until they get a real GM, and maybe they might keep him on board and have the actual GM be above him, and then fire him after next year, or after the draft. A lot of these guys' contracts end after the draft,
Yeah.
so it could be something with that, and they just really need someone just to keep the kind of the motion running. And right now they don't have anyone that actually has any NFL experience really on the team for that aspect. So I think it's that. You look at what happened back in the day with Belichick and Greer, and Greer was fired after the fact too. So he didn't stay on board.
Yeah.
He was still on board when Bill was here, but then he was gone. So it could
Yeah.
be a very similar thing. And whatever coach is being hired is going to want their own GM, and you can't half-ass this and have your own GM still and then another coach. You have to marry the coach and the GM together, and that's what only works when
Yeah.
teams fire a GM and then hire a new GM, keep the coach, and then or they fire the coach and then get a new coach. It just doesn't work. They have to be on the
Yeah.
same page. They have to be getting talent. The only team that really actually works with is really the Eagles. Um,
Yeah.
Other than that, it doesn't usually work. And look at the Eagles; they go through a new coach like every 3 years. So,
Yeah.
um, I think he's going to still be gone, or at least have the new next GM really be above him, and then
Yeah.
eventually be gone. I don't think he's here for a long term thing.
Yeah. If I
Hopefully.
again, we're not going to get into this right now, but just putting out I really hope it, assuming they move on from him, they bring in someone that can work well with the coach and someone that has had experience. I do like Dave Ziegler a lot. He had success when he was here. Again, you could argue how he,
There's talks or if it's gonna be Vrabel, was already talks about who he wants
who,
to
yeah,
be the
who he
GM.
wanted Tennessee to get when
Yeah.
Tennessee fired their last GM and they went in
Hmm.
a different direction.
Yeah, Ryan Cowden is the guy that
Yeah.
he wants. He's the vice president of player personnel and the interim general manager when they fired the general manager, and then he wasn't given the general manager job. Now he's the executive advisor to the general manager of the New York for the New York Giants. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. Again, I'm just going with front office. You don't know as much as you do with coaches because the names aren't as often. But Dave
Mhm.
Ziegler had success here. Thomas Dimitrov had links with both of them as well. And then he, even though he was a Belichick disciple, he had success building the offense in Atlanta.
Mhm.
So those are just some options. But again, get the head coach right first, but also make sure you move on from Wolf and get someone else because anyone can be better than whatever the hell Elliot Wolf did this offseason.
Exactly.
I also don't like that Elliot Wolf led the coup with Jerod Mayo to stab Bill on the back, but that's
Yep.
neither here nor there.
All right. What coaches to bring in? I don't think we have to talk. We've been going on for a while, but the talks are
I,
right now. Oh, go ahead.
I think we can briefly mention some of the top candidates, but go into more detail later on, just
Yeah,
because it
when they
is,
actually interview them.
yeah,
So Vrabel obviously is the one I think that also may have started this whole thing,
yeah,
where him specifically making sure his contract wasn't set to end before the end of the season. They actually altered that with the Browns so that way he could start interviewing. I think that was deliberate on his
yeah,
part. Interviewing with the Jets, I think was deliberate. He ended up having a athletic writer that was the writer for the Jets write a piece on him after being interviewed for the Jets. And I think that was all a calculated kind of effort to try and put more pressure on the Patriots to say, I'm out here. I could be coaching right on your uh, rival.
yeah.
You need to do something. And I think that
Mhm.
also helped put the pressure up, saying, oh, like shit, like he may go to the Jets. Where I don't think he ever actually intends on going there because,
Unless he gets full control. If he gets full control there
mhm,
and say no one else gives him full control, especially
yeah,
seeing how he was essentially fired in Tennessee because his general manager sucked,
yeah.
I could see that happening. But
Mhm.
that's the
But I
only
don't
way
think
I
he
could
would
see him
ever
going
get
to the
full
Jets.
control there, and then I don't think it would ever happen. Just but the
Yeah.
owner.
Yep.
So Vrabel's one. Ben Johnson's another. He's the obvious top pick that a lot of people have. The thing that I'm concerned with him, just you haven't seen him coach
Yep.
as a head coach. Where Vrabel you
Yeah.
have, and we'll get
With
into this
any
a
of
little
the
bit more.
coordinators
But
that don't have head coaching experience,
mhm,
all of them fall under the same boat where they don't. We saw with Jerod Mayo again. Jerod Mayo only coached one position, only played one position. Ben Johnson has coached multiple positions. He's been a coordinator. He was a tight end coach. He was a wide receiver coach. He was a passing game
mhm,
coordinator. I think he might have been running game coordinator too. But he's been all over the offense per se. But he's never actually coached on the defense. He hasn't been an actual head coach. And if you watch Belichick's podcast, The Coach, he actually goes into great detail of the struggles of first year coaches and how much different it is being a head coach versus just a position coach or coordinator.
mhm. And then Brian Flores is the other big name that's out there.
Yeah.
And then you got Aaron Glenn with the Lions, the defensive coordinator there. Brian Cohen, I think that's his first name.
Liam Cohen,
Liam Cohen.
who's a LaSalle graduate, former, he's Warwick native,
Mhm.
your neck of the woods. So that would be not, if they don't end up going with any of these guys
I
having
think
Rhode Island game.
UMass
Yeah, he
coach
went
as
to
well, right?
UMass.
Yep.
Yep.
Um,
He's the
so
Bucks offensive coordinator.
yep. And then you've got other aspects where you look at the college game. You have the Notre Dame head coach.
I don't.
Um,
Yeah. There's some Matt St. Jean from Pat's Pulpit. He put out an article of some likely candidates. He put the Notre Dame coach. He put Steve Scarzigian. I forgot how to pronounce the last name from Texas. The Oregon head coach. But I more
I just
often than
don't
not.
know if they would actually. There's a lot of things now being talked about. Is a lot of the money in college is either similar or more that first time head coaches get.
Yeah.
So it may not be likely. I don't think any of those would come for that
Yeah.
job. I also think the Notre Dame head coach is staying there. I don't think he's going to go to any other program next year. Um,
And it's just you don't outside of Jim Harbaugh the first time, you don't really see college coaches have success going to the NFL without prior NFL experience. You see sometimes NFL head coaches going back to college, or we'll see with Bill,
mhm,
who's never coached in college, but like Pete Carroll coached in the NFL for years, but he was successful at USC and then went to
mhm.
Seattle and successful again. But outside of Jim Harbaugh going from Stanford to the 49ers, in the last 20 plus years, I can't think of another guy that's been successful. Chip Kelly was bad.
Mhm.
Um, who I'm just blanking on everyone else, but
Saban would have been good if he got
that's
the
fair.
if
But
he
he,
got
he also
River
coached in the NFL
Breeze.
at Cleveland.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's
But
right. Because you're just saying if they haven't had any kind of NFL
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think. I can't think of. There's not really many that do that.
Yeah, what's his name? The current Nebraska coach, Matt Rule, he was bad,
Oh
where
yeah,
he was at
he.
Baylor
Hmm.
before. So there aren't a lot of guys that do well. So that's just
Hmm.
the thing that worries me. So I wouldn't even touch anyone from college.
Hmm.
Another intriguing option will be Brian Daboll if he's fired. He has a relationship with Kraft. He's been here tw on two different stints in New England. He had success helping build Josh Allen in Buffalo. He was, I believe, he was Coach of the Year in
Yep, his
2021,
rookie year as a
his
head
rookie
coach.
year, without having a real quarterback in Daniel Jones and leading them to the playoffs, I believe. So
One playoff win too.
yeah, so he's an option. Whereas if he is canned, he's someone I'd be interested in as well.
Yeah, I
I
think one big thing to keep in mind is that owners usually like to go with people they're comfortable with,
Yeah,
so people they at least know of.
yep,
So I think that puts a lot more eggs in the basket of definitely Vrabel. I think is the top candidate. I think it's really his
yep.
job to lose.
Mhm.
And then Dayball, assuming he's fired, which it seemed like today they haven't announced anything yet. They said they have to go through their kind of end of year meetings, but there was a report out saying it's more likely that Dayball's fired and they retain the GM, which I think is ridiculous. I think it should be
Yeah,
the other way around if they're going to fire
yep,
any of
agreed.
them. And then I just the Flores thing, I think is just really tricky.
Yeah,
With
so if the for me, my top is Vrabel by far,
mhm,
and then after that, it's Dayball, Flores, and Johnson are probably the next tier.
mhm,
The Johnson thing scares me because he doesn't have the head coaching experience that we've seen lately more often than not. He's more likely to be a Nathaniel Hackett than he is a Sean McVay, just what the numbers and history shows. So
mhm,
that's why I'd rather have someone that's shown that they can be successful. Flores, I would need him to say who his offensive staff is
mhm,
to have comfort because when he was in Miami, he had a different offense coordinator every single year. And the Patriots have gone through four offensive coordinators in the last 4 years. You're going to be going on to your fifth now.
mhm,
You can't be going on to your sixth and your seventh, year two and three with Drake May. So you have to make sure you get it right.
mhm,
He also did go through defensive coordinators too. So hopefully he's learned this time around what his mistakes he made in Miami.
mhm,
And it seems like, at least in interviews, he's humbled himself, also coaching different areas, coaching under Mike Tomlin, coaching under Kevin O'Connell in different systems to
mhm.
help learn and get better for the next opportunity.
Yeah.
But
Anyone else you want to list?
I think there is Aaron Glenn, like you said, but for me, those are the top four. Are
Hmm.
assuming Dable's fired. It's Vrabel one, and then Dable, Flores, Johnson, and then the next tier of the Liam Cohen, maybe Bobby Slowick from the Texans,
Hmm.
people like that. But I'd rather
Bill O'Brien.
I don't see him going back, and I don't know how he had this offense a year ago,
Hmm.
and their numbers were worse than what your offense was this year. Granted, your quarterback was much, much, much worse,
Hmm.
but he did have success in Houston, and I do like Bill O'Brien, but I think he's going to be at BC for the long haul. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, the
maybe,
only
maybe
way
you
I
never
could
know.
see him leaving BC would be for this job, just based on his family,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
situation, there. But I don't think he would be a real consideration. I also don't know if he would want to work for the Crafts ever again,
yeah,
based off of what happened.
yeah.
So,
I agree.
That could be he jettisoned himself out of here the second that Bill was fired and took a job as an assistant offensive coordinator or co-offensive coordinator
Co-offensive coordinator.
at Ohio State rather
Yeah,
than work in the NFL.
yeah.
So I think
One
that's
thing
very
too with
telling.
Ben Johnson, I tweeted this out from our account, so if you already saw it, I apologize. But one thing that does worry me is of who his defensive coordinator might be if he does get the job. And it would be his former head coach when he was coaching in Detroit, Matt Patricia, who him, Ben Johnson, Matt Patricia have a close relationship, and Bill hired Steve to be his defensive coordinator, so Matt's not going to be the defensive coordinator at UNC. So unless Matty P takes like the Ernie Adams role with Bill, kind of leaves him out of a job. Also, we don't know if Matt wants to go back to college, if he wants to coach in the NFL. So that's just something to keep in mind.
I
Ben
just don't know
Johnson's,
if the Crafts would want Patricia back here either.
but again, if you fall in love with Ben Johnson and he
Mhm.
says Matty P's my
Yeah.
defensive coordinator, also Matty P, I think still lives in the area too.
Yeah, and he still goes back. He was in the stadium for
The 20-year
the 20-year anniversary for the
yeah,
Super Bowl. Um So there was that. He wasn't afraid enough
yeah.
to not come back for that. Anyway, we're running along. There's two more things I wanted to kind of bring up that we haven't gotten to yet, and it really goes into kind of the coaches that you're looking to bring in. And it was, I think, a really good Bill Walsh quote. I think it kind of summarizes kind of what Bill kind of stood for and why Mayo failed. But it was there was a book out by Michael Silver about the Shanahans, and there was this a topic that Mike Shanahan was at a Bill Walsh kind of coaching seminar, and he said that if you coach wide receivers and you can't coach offensive line, or you coach linebackers and you can't coach running backs or quarterbacks, if you're an offensive coach and you can't coach defense, or you're a defensive coach and you can't coach offense, then you'll be fired in 5 years. And I think that was a pretty big kind of quote that I just liked seeing it because it was kind of reflective why the male situation didn't work out is just because he wanted to be that CEO head coach and he didn't know how to do any of it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really had good quote. I wanted to just put it out there to tweet out before. Just kind of interesting. Too with the Vrabel situation where Vrabel is known as this defensive guy, defensive head coach, and in Cleveland this year he was actually coaching the offensive line and the tight ends and more involved with their analytics department. So just kind of broaden his grasp on learning a lot more on the other side of
And
the ball.
And two, the thing with the Browns is he didn't have a relationship with the GM or Kevin Stefanski other than just owners' meetings, like briefly talking. So
Hmm.
he went somewhere where he wasn't comfortable so that he could learn a different system as well.
Hmm. Which I like a lot, and just kind of shows. I always thought that Vrabel, just looking at him and being when facing him, he was probably one of the on par, not on well, someone that could go against Bill
Yep.
and go toe to toe and not be afraid and coach and try and out coach him. There's not many of those coaches out there,
Yeah.
and I just having him learn even more. It was something I really liked about that. And then the Steelers kind of situation where this is where I want them doing a full interview process. I still think Vrabel will be the guy if I want him to be the guy.
Yeah.
You also learn a lot of things by having these interviews. So you get to pick the brains of everyone that's coming here, asking what you would do here, what you do here, what do you do in this situation. And you just get to learn a lot more where different organizations run things differently. It's not always wrong that they're doing it differently. It's just something new. So you haven't seen new things in 25 years. So it'd be helpful to see what these other organizations are doing. See what how Ben Johnson's thinking about offense, because he's probably the most creative offensive mind right now in the league. And it's really fun to kind of watch kind of what he puts out there. And sometimes a little insane. But it's just you need to do a real search. You need to bring in all these minds, and even if you want Vrabel to be guy, you got to listen at least to these other people and see what they have to say. But Mike Tomlin's a really good situation and really good not situation, but a really good comp for what happened to the Steelers back in 2006. Or 2000, the offseason of 2006, after the 2006 season when they had to
Yeah.
replace Cower. Russ Grimm, their offensive line coach, and Ken Wisenhunt, their offensive coordinator, were the top lead candidates. They thought it was going to be one of those two they were going to pick from to be the successor to Cowher. And they ended up bringing, they had them interview. Mike Tomlin also interviewed, and he blew them away. So much to the fact that they ended up hiring him. And it just shows something where what the Patriots didn't do last year, they had Mayo be like, this is the guy that we want. If they actually brought other people in, they would have realized then and there that didn't have a plan. He didn't have
Yep.
a vision. This isn't right. And we have to eat the $10 million now, then go forward and hire all these people and set the organization. And the one thing that they're lucky on, and maybe this is also why they didn't spend the money this offseason, is that they really get a full reset again right now.
Yeah.
Where I didn't think they were going to have. I thought this hiring him could possibly potentially screw them up for a while, but I also didn't
Yeah.
think they were going to fire him after 1 year. But
Yeah.
they really have the opportunity to reset. They have $130 million in cap space. They have the fourth overall pick, and they have Drake May.
Yeah.
Um,
They really got an ultimate mulligan. They really,
mhm.
if you're gonna make a colossal failure decision like that,
Yeah,
you can move on where the guy you should have gotten last offseason is still there and reportedly wants the job.
yeah.
And you pick the right quarterback too.
hmm So they really got lucky, I think, there, and just hopefully they don't mess it up. And go forward and kind of do the right thing this time.
Yep.
All right, that was a long podcast. I think we
Yeah.
got a lot of off our chest. And I don't think we seem too giddy. That on this. So, all right, thanks everyone for listening. We'll have a end of season recap episode probably next week. Just that way we can actually kind of go through, see really what these teams' needs are,
Yeah.
and what went well, what went wrong. It's gonna be a lot that went wrong.
And compare our preseason predictions to what actually happened.
Yeah.
There's one I'm dreading of my own prediction.
I think we are both wrong on a few wide receivers. So, thank you for everyone listening. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. And looking forward to talking to you guys next time.